hopefully on YouTube. And we are going to start recording now as well. My name is John Aaron. I'm in Chicago, and I'm here as one of the managing directors of the Global Mindfulness Collaborative. And our agenda we'll be getting into a bit later, but I'm going to invite John in now to just guide us in a short practice, and also recognizing that today is September 11th, which at least for many of us holds some serious meaning. So, John, please, over to you.
Thank you. This is truly staggering. Just to hear the various, friends speaking in different languages. I don't know how much this ever happens in other domains, but I just am struck by how amazing it is that I can just on my screen, just without even going to the 40 different screens, see friends who I feel a very, very deep Dharma connection with from all around the world. And that technology is allowing us to actually see each other for the most part, either in our own meditation centers, which many of you have your own meditation centers and can see how beautiful they are just in the background, or in your homes. And this is really rather extraordinary because the whole teaching of Dharma and of mindfulness and of MBSR is to really be at home, wherever you are, wherever any of us are, in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, in our interrelatedness with people and with nature and with the universe. And so let's actually keep in mind that life itself is the real meditation practice. And so we don't have to ring bells to start it, although sometimes it's sensible to do that, especially with beginners, but we don't have to ring bells to end it because there's no end to it. So let me suggest that we just take a few moments and in silence, I guess everybody's muted, but just scan a few of the 40 windows and just drink in silence, or maybe just with a little bow or a wave, all of the people that you have karma with. I mean, which is basically everybody, whether you know everybody or not. We have deep, deep intentionality in common by virtue of showing up, and nobody's on this call that doesn't actually love something about this work that keeps us at it over the days, weeks, months, years, and decades. In many, many cases here, many decades. And I'm so touched by the profundity of the karma that's really not just about let's be friends, but with a profound purpose to, in some sense, bring greater wisdom and compassion and common sense and embodied wakefulness and generosity and kindness into the world. And to remember that, in the kind of classical Buddhist framework, that the four immeasurables are basically refuges. And we're taking refuge. And in an era on planet Earth when so many people are becoming refugees, the capacity to actually know that you can take refuge anywhere in the world, at any moment that we all call here and now, is a tremendous kind of evolutionary benefit to transforming our own being and the world and dealing with the enormity of the challenges that humanity is facing everywhere at this moment. And you probably know that in the US there was a political assassination yesterday. These things do not bode well for the future in our country, and you can see it all be playing out, and it all has to do with the human mind when it doesn't know itself or when it falls into using and theming. And so while MBSR was, always of benefit to individuals, there's a certain way in which the M really now has a much larger calling, and that is for humanity itself to, in some sense, wake up to its intrinsically generous, but at the same time potentially violent nature when it falls into selfing, to I, me, and mining, and using and theming. Whether you're American or whether you're anywhere else in the world, that we're all cells of the one body politic of humanity. And the world itself, is in crisis in many different ways and has a fever. The planet has a fever that we are the cause of. And so waking up has never been more important, and learning how to take refuge and recognize that in some sense we're all refugees, and knowing something about the divine abodes. Abode in English means a place where you can abide. And right now we're all in our homes, and that is the place where we can abide. And right now, hopefully, we're all in touch with our bodies and our hearts, and that is a place not only of refuge, but of abiding and of actually offering oneself to the world in ways that express the profundity of the love affair that taking your seat in meditation already is and always has been. So with that said, let's just take one or two brief timeless moments and just drop into silence. I'll stop talking and give yourself over to resting in your own heart. Alone, wherever you are, and together because we're all here together. So in the spirit of what I just said, of life itself being the meditation practice, let's all, as these 2 hours unfold, do the best we can to reside in our hearts, to remain open and spacious in the midst of all of the temptations to fall into some kind of reductionist view of things, or how you wanted it or see it as opposed to how someone else sees it. I think we're all engaged in a remarkable process that several people have really been incredibly instrumental in bringing us along in this process to develop a kind of curriculum guide for all of us, really, for teachers. The real curriculum guide, of course, is in here. Okay, and I've been reluctant in many ways over the decades to have a kind of anything like that because, as you all know, the entirety of the program really comes out of your own love and your own understanding and your own practice and your own framework for parsing those 8 weeks that we call MBSR and what the curriculum, quote unquote, is. But without you, there's no curriculum. And so there's a unique element of this. And it's very important to just say this, that the tendency of new teachers might be to fill up all the space in the classroom with my great ideas for how everybody will most appreciate mindfulness or most appreciate me as a teacher. And it's really important to be mindful of that impulse or tendency and to leave a lot of space, which means that we trust that in some sense the intrinsic Buddha nature of everybody in the room will supply the true curriculum and the insight and the liberation that's absolutely at the heart of this entire approach to living one's life with integrity in the face of what I called years ago after Zorba, the full catastrophe of the human condition, which we are seeing played out now, like in unbelievable ways. So I'm going to stop now and bow to all of you for the privilege of being part of this love affair. This does not just come out of me. This is coming out of all of us. And it has a life that is really so transcends and liberates us from the I, me, and mine personal pronouns and the sort of story of me, starring me. And it's an enormous gift to other people who are suffering to have a place of refuge called MBSR where they can come and be met and seen and recognized as already okay, no matter what's wrong with them. And that there's always, as long as you're breathing, more right with you than wrong with you. And the challenge is, how am I going to be in relationship with this moment? So I have no more words.
Oh, thank you so much, John. And I know you have more words, but we'll come to that later. So I just wanted to go over the agenda for this morning that John has so beautifully started. And it's wonderful to see all these graphics coming up. So I'm just going to say a few words about the Global Mindfulness Collaborative and then hand it back to John, who's going to start the ball rolling on how this new curriculum and new teacher guide evolved. And then he will hand it to Lynn, and then Lynn will hand it to Eric. And then we're going to open it up for questions. And the questions will be done via the question and answer function on in the Zoom mode. And if you don't know where that is, if you don't see it at the bottom of your screen, click on the bottom 3 dots on the right, and you'll see something that says Q&A, and you click on that, and then you can ask away. And Elaine Rethels will be sort of mediating or moderating the questions, and we'll compile them as they come up. And we are also, for those of you that haven't received the curriculum yet, Santi, I don't know if you can stick it in the chat as an attachment. Then everyone here will have it. Not that we want you to open it and start reading it, because that will take away from the presentation, but it's there when you need it. Just a few words. The Global Mindfulness Collaborative, which is kind of hosting this event, was founded in 2018 and incorporated in 2022. It was an offshoot of I think really the last major training that the Center for Mindfulness did at UMass, which was a train the trainer program, and there were 30 plus of us in that. And most of us are members of this Global Mindfulness Collaborative. Some have gone off on as well to other organizations, which is great. And at the moment, our membership is quite limited, but we're intending to open it up to many others. And this is a start of that, I suppose, just to introduce ourselves. But we will be opening it up to other training organizations and other trainers as well as to the people that we've all trained. So far, just through the Global Mindfulness Collaborative, we have trained over 1,200 students worldwide, 1,200 teachers worldwide, new teachers worldwide. And we've created our own training curriculum that really evolved from the wisdom of all of the international membership of the GMC. And most of us have identified ourselves here, so you can see how international it is. And that collective wisdom, which was added to the collective wisdom, of course, of Jon and Saki and everybody at the Center for Mindfulness at UMass and Brown, and then the international collective wisdom. And many of us, of course, as will be pointed out, and as is said in the new curriculum, helped with our commentary and editorial suggestions into this new curriculum. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jon. And Jon, if you can address sort of your sense of the evolution of this teacher training guide and what you found yourself doing as part of that and working with everybody else along the way. But you have to unmute.
I have a construction project going on next door. My neighbor is doing some gigantic
The
project.
Zoom filter is amazing. We don't hear a thing.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so if necessary, I've got headphones here and I can put them on. This was a project I never wanted to be involved in. As many of you know, I felt like in the spirit of orthogonality, I wanted MBSR to be something that grew not so much out of a conventional professional training, but something that was really a kind of love affair with the deepest and most universal aspects of a Dharma expression, whatever the traditions one has been touched by. And that by virtue of the intention to offer some kind of wisdom framework within the domain of medicine, because medicine and meditation are so profoundly linked at even the etymological hip, that MBSR would be best served and serve best in the world if it came out of the hearts of the individuals who are doing it, and the framework was very simple, and then you fill in the blanks, okay? The sort of, and understanding of emptiness would allow those blanks to be filled in a way that was self-validating and good enough, if you will, for now. And I always felt like, and I think all of us have probably felt at one time or another, who am I to actually teach this stuff? Okay, I'm not Thich Nhat Hanh, I'm not the Dalai Lama, I'm not blah, 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 nor am I selling or teaching Buddhism. But there is some element of, a profound, element of MBSR that is M. And if you're talking about the M, you're talking about the Dharma in the most universal way possible, but it has to be, in some sense, in alignment with the thousands of years of tradition in various kinds of domains. Not that you need to know it all, but in some sense we need to learn how to live some piece of it with integrity. And then your being does all the holding of the space in the room. And you know what I'm talking about because that's your life now. I mean, you do that. That's and I shouldn't even say do, you be that. And so I always felt like, aside from full catastrophe living, which is kind of like a very kind of rudimentary framework for what MBSR would be, if you can't figure it out from full catastrophe living, you're probably not ready to teach MBSR. That was my view for a long time. But for various reasons over the decades, I have surrendered to a deeper kind of offering that, in fact, the success that we've all had in some way in our own frameworks has led to the world needing something that's even bigger than what we've managed to do so far. And that we don't have the same kind of leverage with everybody that we had in the old days when there was like only 8 of us doing this kind of thing, and we could all be in the same room and lie down on the floor and do a body scan together. So, and especially since professional training started to actually energize very large numbers of people to be part of this new, I don't want to call it a profession, but a love affair with the way meditation and medicine and healthcare and the world all merge in some sense, that that this was a worthy work, a worthy way to devote one's life, and it should be a source of right livelihood. And it was meant to be that from the very beginning, that if you can't afford to teach this and you have to drive a taxi cab, or now it would be an Uber, to make a living so that you can teach MBSR, that's not the sort of optimal sort of way to go about things. So and because of the split that happened at a certain point in 2017, and the tumultuous time of this institution and that institution and who owned MBSR and all of that kind of stuff, it was really a time of tremendous turmoil, which I hope we are in the process of healing in some profound way. And I do want to bow to Eric Loucks, who's here from Brown, for his role in all of this, because, I don't know where the hell you came from, how the universe produced you, Eric, but at the right moment, it certainly did. And in a public health framework, which was the original intention of MBSR, was, yes, medicine and meditation, but the whole point was not for individuals, but so that just for individuals, but that we'd actually transform medicine and healthcare and potentially larger spheres of human activity via this model system, let's say. And one of the compelling reasons for producing this curriculum guide is that Eric has been at the forefront of research to try to bring this into the mainstream in ways it has not been in the mainstream. In particular, getting it funded in the United States for people through Medicare, which would be a quantum leap in how mindfulness moves into the world. And it will, of course, be fraught with all sorts of problems because we don't have a language that allows people to understand that what Dharma is. And so people might, have all sorts of issues with, is this kind of stealth Buddhism? And we've been accused of that, or this or that, or everything else. But Eric, I think if there's one person on the planet that can thread this needle in a way that could actually bring mindfulness to a whole other level of humanity in a way that is not pushing an agenda, religious or any other kind of agenda, but is understanding a certain kind of new way of framing interconnectedness inwardly and outwardly, and how that influences not just the health of us as individuals, but of families and of societies and of cultures and ultimately of the world, then humanity's in a very bad place. And it wasn't quite so evident in 1979, but it's big time evident now. It was probably true in 1979 too. I mean, with the nuclear war and the Russians and the Americans, poised to annihilate each other. But even then, I mean, it's much more complicated now and much scarier, and the risk's much higher. So I see the curriculum guide as a vehicle for giving people who are interested in maybe doing this kind of work as part of their profession, many of whom are either very young and haven't had a profession yet and want to choose this, or people who are further along in their work and really feel like they want to integrate this into their work or let this become a larger part of their work, that they need something to guide them through what this thing is. And so we put this together and we tried to language it in a way that really did not privilege one group over another, or even who the source of this is. The source of this is really from all of us. And I think the spirit of it, and I would not have been involved in it if there wasn't this spirit of it, is that we want all of you to, in some sense, not just sign off on this, but to contribute to an ever improving articulation of what this thing is. Okay. And in different cultures and in different languages, it might mean slightly different things. So there's both a challenge and a responsibility here to play with it. And as you can see, I actually printed it out, because I understand things better when I can hold them in my hands as opposed to which iteration am I even looking at on the screen. So but it's changing so fast that I don't necessarily recommend you printing it out because you may have an older version, in 2 days. But that said, what we're looking for now is to actually offer it to the community as a way of getting everybody's input about, like, how valid is this in your experience? Is there something missing? Is there something that we've put in that's egregious, that's really, wrong or insensitive to particular kinds of perspectives, or where we've left out certain essential elements that new teachers should at least have named and pointed to that might help them in understanding the kind of parts of MBSR that can't be put into words. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, as you know, I could talk about this forever, but I really, I'm going to stop now and just invite the rest of this time to be one of deep inquiry and conversation as other people who have been part of this first wave, so to speak, could talk about their own contributions to this and how it's unfolded, and then really elicit the deepest feedback from how authentic is this for you? How does this relate to your own experience? What is off? What doesn't ring true to you? Or what works in America but doesn't work in China or Japan or whatever? And even in terms of languaging it, and I know we have certain issues in different languages about how we even express mindfulness. But my feeling is that if we don't among ourselves understand it in the Dharma framework that I just was pointing to in some very profound way, and then turn it into one more cognitive behavioral intervention, which is what a lot of people are motivated to do, young people. That's their training in cognitive behavioral this is or that's, and they see this as one more cognitive that is so wrong that we have to be really articulate about the kind of missing dimension, that orthogonal dimension that is not excluding any other dimensions, but actually holding them in such a way that even conventional therapy is transformed in this new dimensionality. So that's a kind of creative challenge that really is completely dependent on our own embodied meditation practice, moment by moment by moment, in how we live, how we carry ourselves, how we watch our own minds, lose our minds, lose, the present moment, and then hopefully recognize that, and in recognizing it already be back in what I like to refer to as the boundless spaciousness of awareness, which is like the ultimate refuge. Okay, and it's always here. Access to it's problematic. That's why we exercise the muscle. But awareness is never not here. It's our, in some sense, most profound default mode. And the question is, can we actually shift from our default mode of mindlessness to mindfulness, of thinking and I, me, and mining constantly and generating untrue narratives about ourselves and how just the entire story of me, and actually generate a much larger understanding that may partly be a story, but it's a story, a much bigger story of we, and ultimately the story of no story, of awareness itself, no center, no periphery, just like space. No neuroscientist knows how awareness comes about out of 3 pounds of meat in the head, or trillions of gazillions of synaptic connections and billions of neurons. No one knows how wakefulness is possible, embodied wakefulness. which I love because, there's a lot of room for investigation. And meditation is a, prime form of investigation. So I'll stop there, but to just say, please read this thing carefully as if you were an editor. Does this ring true to me? Or does this work in Japanese or in Chinese or in French or Spanish or whatever, Portuguese, whatever language you're speaking with the people that you work with? And help us to create a document that actually there will never be perfect, will always be in process, but that will be good enough for now, which has always been the root principle of MBSR. It doesn't, is it good enough for now? And if you blew something in class 3, there's always class 4 where you can actually apologize for it if you, or, the cause of it, but, or just straighten things out a little bit. It's a very, very forgiving practice because when all is said and done, it is a love affair. So thank you. And back over to you, Jon.
Yeah, and now thank you so much, Jon. Lynn Koerbel, who's amazingly put in, I don't know how many hours into this project, Lynn, and to say nothing of all the hours you put into our training and everybody else's training. And such a pleasure for you to be here and present this to us as well. So I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Jon, and thank you, Jon Kabat-Zinn, and thank you all. I don't know if I've ever been on this kind of a Zoom call where everybody actually shows up. That's radical. And you showed up. What I feel in my heart right now is from love and from this willingness and wish to connect and further the work that we've all been involved in, the practice that we've all been involved in. And so it's with a deep bow and great humility, actually. I feel a little bit, John Aaron and Jon Kabat-Zinn and I had the great luxury of meeting in purpose for an hour a week and a half ago. And we kept using the metaphor of birthing, like something is being birthed here. Something is moving out into the world. And this is part of the world, though it's really the whole world. But this gathering is you all are also midwives in all of your corners of the world. And so along with echoing everything that Jon just said about the curriculum and asking for his great forgiveness for pushing him to do this, because I was one of those forces that said, no, this is really needed, along with Eric and Florence. I want to just create a little bit of a through line, because I've sat at tables. I can distinctly remember sitting with Saki and Florence, Melissa Blacker, other people, Paul Galvin, other people who were involved in earlier iterations of the curriculum. And it was always this feeling of final for now. And what needed to be more explicitly named for now to support trainees, because the trainees, people, you all know this, people are banging down the door with like, I want to do this calling. People show up at our information sessions, and I'm sure in your centers too, are like, I don't understand what this is. I don't understand exactly how I'll use it, but I feel called to do something. And I feel called to do this. This is one of the daily pleasant events in my life of meeting people who feel this call. So I just want to name those people who were also in several iterations of this document that, as Jon is holding in his hands, I do encourage you, once we have the more final for now version, to consider printing it out. I'm going to do that as well. But I remember a moment when, in this iteration, Florence and I were up at her cabin in Vermont, working in separate rooms, running back and forth, reading to each other. So, and I would say that the wish, the intention was to support, to put enough form onto the essence and to invite the kinds of dialogue that happens regularly between trainers, between teachers and mentees, the kind of dialogue that in just these few short weeks have shown up. Helen Ma and I, we haven't connected for a while. We had an exchange in the comments section of the curriculum. Kevin and me, Roy and I, there was like, this is the real curriculum. How we work with the tensions that Jon said of what's enough form. So I want to say one thing about this iteration. Um, Much of my impulse for this iteration arose after when I met David Treleaven, actually, and after I'd read his book. And we'd had a particular conversation, and I walked away, and in my mind, it was MBSR, in my mind, has always been implicitly trauma sensitive. But the explicitness is needed. Because for some people, especially people with trauma, and who doesn't find ourselves in that moment sometimes, if you don't tell somebody, you can open your eyes in practice, and that's not a failure. That's actually wisdom to reorient, reground, or stand up, or even stop practicing in that moment. Without that concrete material instruction, it's not actually evident to many people. So there was a need for more implicit care, conversation. Here's where words could really support people in their practice, in their recognition that if the breath wasn't a place of safety, you could come to your feet. So many people said, "Oh, I can meditate now. I can do this." So, this idea of opening the doors wider to the Dharma Hall, opening the doors to practice. I often use in my trainings the principle of universal design. And I don't know what year it was, but when the American Disabilities Act came through and they started making curb cuts on sidewalks or putting bigger doorknobs or different kinds of handles on doors so that people with arthritis or people in a wheelchair could easily get across the street or could open a door or wider door frames for wheelchairs. It actually benefited everyone. It benefited kids on their trikes. It meant more accessibility to everyone. And that was the intention, was to make, if we opened these doors, more people would feel welcome, more people will feel included. And I'm not saying we finished that at all. That's what this is for, so we can be yet more inclusive. So I'll say that along with trauma sensitivity, and I believe that David really did this in his book, he also really raised trauma out of the individual problem. It's not like, oh, this is yours, and you better go off into a corner and heal this. This is our reality. And we have some responsibility for the systems that create oppression, that create bias and prejudice. And with that recognition, all of a sudden we could see nine dots with through a whole other realm. Like, oh, here the nine dots just got even bigger. And all the research that's coming out about implicit bias and how mindfulness can shift implicit bias. It's being used now. Another colleague, Colleen Kamenisch, teaches MBSR to judges. And we could spend hours here talking about all the amazing initiatives that are going on around the world in these places that deeply need it. So I wanted to just set a bit of a through line here. I also can't help not speaking about public health and Eric Loucks. And I don't know if Eric was the first trainee, but he was my first trainee who was in public health. And I was thrilled when he came through. And it's been a joy to work with you, Eric, and I'll pass it over to you now because you have some wonderful things to add here.
Uh,
Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn and John, and really pleasure to be here. I think through the lens that I'm looking at the curriculum, I think just as Lynn shared, we've tried to really enhance its trauma sensitivity, its ability to meet various different populations and cultures as best as possible. And we're still very open to feedback on how well it does that. As I've gone through the curriculum, I've really tried to keep an eye on the science of it. So we have a couple of grants from the National Institutes of Health on meta-analysis and systematic reviews right now. So we're really trying to get into the science of mindfulness and MBSR in particular. And so I'm looking at it through that lens as the curriculum came through to make sure it's as consistent as possible with what the clinical trials are showing. Um, we also, being at Brown, we did have legal input on the curriculum as well, because many people offering the curriculum are not clinicians, for example. And so when we're, say, looking at, as Lynn shared, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that we want to be sure that we're not discriminating against anyone to not be allowed into MBSR, for example, and especially being aware of our lane if we're not a clinician on making those judgments ourselves, so that you can see some languaging in there where, Willoughby Britton, who's a colleague at Brown, she once talked about how when we take, say, Tylenol or aspirin or something, we'll get a pill bottle, and then there's all the potential adverse events on the pill bottle, and we read those and we're aware of what those are. So then if something arises, we can decide if we want to shift to a different medication. And so we've worked with the legal team at Brown to be able to show at least where the evidence that we're seeing around, you know, where potential adverse events could arise or different conditions, but at the same time recognizing that mindfulness has been effectively used for people with pretty much any condition. And so we can also allow the participant themselves to make that decision alongside their clinician about if it's a good fit. And so I found that that is opening up the door to MBSR, but then also putting on guardrails for it to be as safe as possible, maximizing the benefits. Um, I think another piece is looking at it through the health insurance coverage angle, so that we're seeing MBSR starting to be reimbursed by health insurers in different countries, such as Singapore, for example, or I understand Germany or Switzerland. I understand there's some reimbursement there. Even in the United States, the VA, like the Veterans Administration, hospital system now reimburses for MBSR in a lot of different ways so that it's accessible. And so part of one of our NIH grants is to look at that approach, and so I'm also trying to look at it through if a health insurer or a policymaker is looking at this curriculum guide, how does it land in terms of being accessible, being evidence-based, being scalable, that not one institution owns it, that there's sort of like a set of best practices as much as possible, recognizing, as Jon Kabat-Zinn was sharing, is, so much of the practices within our own wisdom and our own mindfulness practice coming out through the way that we teach, but also from a health insurance perspective, what are the bounds around what is being offered? And so even working with the American Public Health Association, and have submitted a letter of intent to write a policy statement through them that's been accepted for a full letter of intent to now be submitted. So one of the things that we've done with some of our qualitative work is we interviewed policymakers and health insurers and healthcare administrators and MBSR teachers, MBSR participants about what they would recommend would be needed in order for health insurance coverage of MBSR. And we published some papers on that. But one of the things that they recommended is that really recognized clinical bodies like American Public Health Association or the American Medical Association or the American Psychological Association. There'd be other similar bodies in other parts of the world for them to come out with statements on how they feel the evidences are. So we had one senator's staff member share, before she was going to take it to her boss to bring it forward for advocacy for health insurance coverage. She wanted to know, what the American Public Health Association thought about it and the American Medical Association. So we're working with the American Public Health Association to create one of these policy statements, but also just inviting you to know that if you're part of these organizations, that is something that is of service for us to do, so that uh, it will increase the likelihood that it can be scalable and accessed by folks who might not otherwise be able to afford it. So I'm also been looking at it through that lens so that the curriculum aligns as much as possible. I'm at Brown and for uh, for whatever it's worth, we have been involved with some of the energy to like put it together, but it's really designed to be open access and for it to be owned by the global community. And so you'll see that's why we've posted it on the Open Science Framework website. I'm gonna pop the link one more time. I know Fran's been doing this there. That's the best access point right now. And uh, I can maybe even just share my screen for a second. So if you go on there, you'll just see right now we just have the English translation, but the curriculum's actively being translated right now into many different languages, Spanish, French, Japanese, Chinese, for example. And so those will pop up. And so you can just click on that folder.
Eric, say what OSF is for people just.
Yeah, Open Science Framework. And so it's a platform that allows for data sharing, file sharing. It's designed to allow for version control, but we can also cite it so that if you ever want to cite it in a publication, for example, there's a DOI link that should be active shortly. So you can just click on those things there, those three little dots, and download. You can already see we're already at version 1.1, so that's as of last night. And so if you are ever wanting to see what the most recent version is, come to this site. I think, uh, this is the DOI link right here. So when you're citing it, and then we put the citation there, but this authorship list could grow, for example, over time. So if you're ever citing it, so it's a way for us to be able to point towards where the curriculum lives, and as we get more advice on what's called for in this moment in the curriculum, it can be updated. And then you always see right now it's version 1.1, for example. But if you ever taught of a version 1.0, you can put it as that. And so that's some of the overview of some of the shifts that we've been making uh, as much as possible in collaboration with the global community and of course with Jon, who's had a very large impact on this. So happy to answer any questions around any of those things. And then I think Fran Sade was also going to share a few words. She's Associate Director of the Non-Degree Programs at the School of Professional Studies at Brown. We've been working together for over a decade now, I think, and she's just played a really important role in really moving this project along, making sure that the design is really complete. She is a scientist as well, and also very smart and wise. So she also just looks at the curriculum with the unique skill set that she has to be able to enhance the quality and also just to get it done. And she's just been really instrumental in that piece as well. So, Fran, any words you wanted to share around anything you feel is left to be said about the curriculum?
All right, there we go. Yeah, thanks, Eric. I am feeling very overwhelmed with humility and gratitude. I come at this project not as an MBSR teacher, so a deep bow to all of you and the work that you do. When we were getting ready, Lynn approached me and said, we're almost done with this curriculum. We've been working on it for a long time and we're getting ready to release it. Can you help? And I was happy to step into that role. And I really tried to come at it with, being able to present it in a way that would really hold to the authenticity, what John spoke to earlier, the authenticity of the original intent of the document, and also allowing it to really, for the beauty of its content to shine through, and for it to be accessible. And I'm really excited for it to be out in the world and be used. This is so much bigger than Brown or anyone, and I love that we're able to put it up on the Open Science Framework and have it be just accessed with ease. So as much as you can, Eric, thanks for walking everyone through that. But just ask for your patience in these early days, as with many eyes on it, it's going to be strengthened. So we have, and I will put into the chat, but we have a platform, a forum for you as you're reviewing it, as you're using it in the world. You're going to come across typographical errors, but also larger things that you can bring to our attention. This document really is designed to be kind of a living, community-owned document. So I will put the link to the form in the chat. So please contribute in that way. We are planning to have the next 6 to 8 weeks be an intentional time of gathering input and feedback. And then after that, we're hoping to we'll launch version 2.0, and then hopefully that can live out in the world for a while without having to update it too much. So I wanted to also just invite folks to also submit any images that you might have. As you go through the document, you'll see we've already received several images and from the MBSR teaching community. And one of the beautiful things about MBSR is that it's such a globally taught program, experienced in different ways across different cultures. And so we're trying to highlight that. So you'll see we still have some stock images. So we're hoping to kind of swap those out. So I will also drop a link to a form where you can upload images. We do ask that any images you submit, that you've gotten permission, that you are the owner and that you've gotten permission from any individuals that are featured in that image. And then also you can provide kind of a caption that we can attach to that image if we do end up using it. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to touch upon. Yeah, for the translation.
Explain what the word caption means, just because not all of us are English speakers and that's not a word we usually use.
Yeah, thanks, John. So with the image, we'd love to have just a brief statement to provide some context around what the image is, what the significance is, the location, if it was from a training center, the name of the training center. And there's in the form where you can upload the images, there's some more language about what we're looking for there. But if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And then yeah, again, just deep gratitude. I much prefer to be in the background for these sort of things. So thank you for your patience with me. And yeah, just so excited to be a part of this project, even in a small way. And thank you, John, Eric, Lynn, and Florence for really the work that you've done to launch this. And yeah, I will step out of the way now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fran. In terms of patience, I mean, you respond to things so quickly. I don't know what that word even means in your lingo, because I've sort of been behind the scenes on this a little bit and see these comments come in from John and like instantly they're responded to. It's quite astonishing, actually. So deep bows to you. And there have been a number of questions come up as you've been speaking about the translations And I know, we've got some people from the GMC who are translating, but can you explain how you see that process unfolding?
Yes, yeah. I know I've received several emails from individuals. I know you're eager to translate and certainly want it to be accessible in that manner. So we were busy trying to get just that first version out there. But now that we do have that, I'm gonna shift gears and work on getting kind of a raw word format that you could use to then translate. And then also eventually could also try to be able to share the actual InDesign program files if we want the translations to be in the designed format. So happy to work with you. Brown isn't able to kind of do that work, but certainly want to make it set you up for success if that's a route we want to go in. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. And then I will plan on, once the Word document is kind of in good shape, I can put that up on the Open Science Framework, and that could actually be downloaded directly for anyone who is looking to translate it into your language. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, I wonder, do we want to have a process for permissions to translate? I don't know best practices around this, but I certainly imagine we would want anyone to be able to have it in their own language. But I don't know the best practices around who the best individual would be and how to vet the translations.
Well, I don't either, but I do feel a sort of profound degree of confidence in this group of people that you've already translated it in some way. All of you who are in different countries that do not speak English as the first language, you've already done it in a certain way. I mean, you're doing it every day when you're teaching it. So I think among those of you from a particular country, probably it would be a good idea to get together, and rather than one person do the whole thing, let it be a group of people who work on the translation, just as we did with the English version, okay, which is in some sense translating something from a language that has no words into what you feel collectively is the best way to reach people in your culture. Okay, and I know there are issues because we've discussed them, especially in Chinese, about whether one uses Chinyen for the translation of mindfulness or another perspective. And I have my own very strong view about that, but I'm not going to go into it now. But to just say you folks can work this kind of thing out in a way that obviously needs to have integrity, but that's what it's all about in the first place. So I have tremendous confidence that the translations will actually be true to not just the literal translation of the document, but the heart that's almost impossible to put into words in the first place.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Florence, because I see your face there, and I know, and Lynn mentioned that you were one of the people sitting around the table originally. I just wondered if you wanted to, add anything to what's already been said. I think it'd be really lovely to have your voice in here. Although I've just put you on the spot, so I don't, but you have to unmute.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Thank you for asking, and thank you, everyone. For me right now, I feel like this, it's a really profound moment, and of allowing this to almost formally be out in the world and do the work that it does. To me, when I saw some emails about this before, I just felt like there's such profound love that I venture to say anyone on this call feels about the transformational power that's embedded in the Dharma of this curriculum. And I'm just grateful that I have had the opportunity to contribute in the littlest way, because it's all of us. It's every one of us living inside it. So, other than the places where there's so much division in the world, and this is This is so deeply wholesome. And it is a time of waking up. And it is a form of waking up. So I'm just beyond the words, but thank you to everyone who's made it more and more accessible, and especially to the work that's gone on at Brown most recently. So thank you. It's mostly that and a deep bow to everyone here.
Thanks, Florence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And
So-
if I can just piggyback on that for one moment, um, people should know, if you don't, that MBSR is alive and well at the UMass. And that there's a whole group of extremely dedicated teachers. I can't scan through 40 screens at the moment, but a whole group of dedicated teachers where the lineage has been unbroken since the fall of 1979. And I just want to honor that, because there have been in the past all these different, like Brown, UMass. This has nothing to do with UMass. It has nothing to do with Brown. It has to do with the sort of more universal commitment that we all have to something that, in some sense, is very difficult to articulate. And that's why we're developing a document at this particular point, because of the astonishing success that all of our collective work has given rise to in the world over decades. And so it's very beautiful that there's no ownership of this curriculum. I mean, that's like completely consistent with the kind of Dharma essence of the work. But it's also very important, and I'm so moved to see so many friends on my screen, that so many of you that I haven't seen in a very long time. And I just want to say that we're all part of this process in some really profound way. And I feel like the people who had the first iteration of putting this thing together, and the sort of took on the responsibility for doing it in this way, in the aftermath of all of the problems, in the past, is really has the potential to unify our intentionality and heal some of the wounds that, unfortunately unfolded during that time. And I just want to bow to everybody for the openness to even come on this dialogue at this particular moment, and just, let me just say, show your face, but even much more, share your heart.
Thank you, Jon. Just before we open it up to the questions that are here, I have a question, or just not necessarily maybe a concern. I haven't had time to read through the whole thing in detail, and I know for me personally, until I actually use it in the context of teaching the class, I won't have all the comments I might have otherwise. But because there's so much in this right now, is there, on any of your parts, a concern for sort of instrumentalizing what is on the printed page, as opposed to like remembering, oh, why are we teaching this and how are we teaching this? How much of that thought went into, I'm sure a lot of thought went into it when the writing was being done, but it's so easy to take this and say, oh, it says here I should do this, and I think it's really important that we recognize the ease on which we can fall back onto something that's printed, as opposed to, falling back on our own practice. So, yeah, it's so beautiful that, what is written, and yet, there's everything that's unwritten. It's so much more important, as you started out saying, Jon, originally. But
Can I add to that, Jon?
yeah, please. Yes.
Just because I'm going to be teaching from it myself starting next week. And I feel like that's where the rubber will meet the road, and where those like, well, this is off, or not that we're ever going to capture in the words, but that the worthy articulation of like what's next. And as Fran was speaking to, the technological advances that allow an electronic version to include live links to really important resources. This I want to bring out the resource, Rebecca Crane and a whole lot of other people around the world who wrote the article about MBSR being a curriculum for this time, about diversity inclusion, and works week by week with it. That's another open source document. I think I need to go back and find a place to put the MBI TAC and the TLC. But the fact that this is so alive and so relational, we can relate to these words and in this community feels really different and fantastic to have the 1979 copy or the, you know, the 2013 edition of Full Catastrophe Living, but to have this document that can pulsate with what's new and arising, new research, all of this it's pretty phenomenal. So teach with it. Find out for yourself. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I'm gonna, so Elaine, who's been monitoring some of the questions, there aren't that many questions yet, amazingly. But Elaine, I wonder if you would sort of step in here and present what's been presented. And I see some others on the chat that didn't go in the questions, but I'll put them in.
Yeah, I haven't been monitoring the chat. I've been trying to, but so one of the things that I'd like to start with is that there was a question about the length of formal practice. And this person was saying that they saw an effect of COVID on one's capacity to do 30 to 45 minutes. But I think in terms of, smartphone use and screen use, and just over the decades that many of us have been teaching, seeing the change in people when you say 45 minutes. And I'm wondering if, Jon, I know you have much to say. And in the curriculum, it talks a lot, Lynn, about, why 45 minutes and putting that out right in the orientation. But if anybody wants to comment on that, that would be good. Yeah.
I'm happy to just offer a view about that. I think it's becoming more and more obvious that the technological advances of the past 10 or 15 years, and that everybody's walking around now in the world looking at this and not looking at this, is creating huge problems for our youth, for the people who, don't even have a kind of intrinsically analog experience of the world because they were born into this digital universe, which is changing at warp speed because of AI. Now everything is like, AI this, you want an AI that, you want an AI assistant. And I would argue, and it's a very radical argument, and I'm not saying it's true, but I would argue that we're at a kind of inflection point on planet Earth for humanity in terms of our technological prowess, that we're ignoring the virtues and the benefit and the miracle of 13.8 billion years of evolution that have allowed the periodic table to merge into bodies that can talk on screens or in the real world without the screens. And that asking people to reclaim not just 45 minutes a day, but the 24 hours that we have that we're alive. And there's only one way to do that, and that's moment by moment. And then arguments about whether it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes doesn't matter. It's just a skillful means for doing this. But if you start compromising on it out of some kind of radical delusion that time is, sort of empty of essential meaning, then you're not recognizing the fact that we are suffering. Let's not forget that the first noble truth is the actuality of suffering. And we've now invented hugely novel ways to suffer and to transform the brains of young people and adolescents to the point where they are losing touch with this generic inheritance of 13.8 billion years. So I would argue from that point of view, 45 minutes is nothing. And sometimes we have to, and this is maybe my New York street upbringing, sometimes we just have to kick ass and be strong and say, no, there's a reason for this. And even though it's much more convenient, pretty soon you start compromising it, and it's like, there's no time for formal practice. And you could say, and you can rationalize it by saying, yeah, but we understand every moment is the practice and I'm just living my life. That's very easy to say, but it's almost impossible to do unless you get your ass on the cushion, metaphorically at least, for extended periods of time where you don't want to be there anymore. And then you deal with the discomfort. So that's my argument for keeping it as it is, not because of tradition, but because of the place we find ourselves in the world right now.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. I feel like it's even more important now to train our attention to just be with what's in the present moment, because there's so many distractions. So a more general question, Lynn, you spoke about incorporating TSM. You talked about moving from a more individual point of view to a systemic point of view, which I really appreciated. There's a question about, is there an overview of changes from the 2019 curriculum? Like, what is significant? Yeah.
I think I saw that question. No, there isn't like a Cliff Notes version of what got changed. I will say though that we had these moments of being in person, but a lot of what happened in the last 3 years, especially during the pandemic, was that Florence and I would work on it, or Florence and Eric and I would work on it. We'd pass it to Jon Kabat-Zinn. He'd be in the middle of the mitigation retreat or something, and then eventually it would come back to us. But more and more, this felt very significant in this iteration, is that Jon's voice, Jon, I experience your voice in this very, very clearly, which I think is one of the things that's really interesting right now with new, younger teachers coming in, is that some people come in to teach MBSR and they don't know who you are. It's interesting, And my experience is your voice and the process of your writing conveys something. It transmits something. And the hope was that as you continue to work with it, that transmission would come through. So I've had people, even with the earlier version that we were using, say, all of a sudden, like they're in the training and they're like, I'm part of a lineage that I didn't know. I didn't know that was part of the training. This isn't just a professional training. So there isn't a Cliff Notes version of the changes. And this is why actually I think we're all saying, encourage you to read through, see how it feels now, rather than looking at what was, and just like, well, what's landing now? What feels off? What needs to shift? I hope that was comprehensive.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I know when I was reading it, and I've been away, I just got back from a plane yesterday morning, but just the sense of fullness of heart and recognizing the voices of all of my teachers, and a reminder, kind of a remembering in a way. So it's just beautiful. There's a question that I think is important it's really about the underpinnings. The person writes, could something be clarified for me, please? In my training, it was always implied that MBSR was not Buddhism, but in this session, it seems that it actually is. There's been a talk about non-duality and emptiness and dukkha, Four Noble Truths. So the question is, how may I, as a secular teacher of mindfulness, share MBSR with authenticity? So maybe some clarification about why we're talking about these Buddhist underpinnings here, and how you could deepen in them and then bring that to the classroom.
I'll have a shot at that. And just to say, I mean, the document's not finished, and it could have endless appendices. There are already too many. But what we're trying to do is reference places where these kinds of questions have already been raised and at least argued or explained why things are the way they are. And the one thing that I might just mention is this book, Teaching Mindfulness, that came out a number of years ago by Don McCowan, Diane Reibel, and Mark McCosey. And they asked me to write the foreword, and I wrote the foreword. And although part of the foreword is about what's in the book, a lot of the foreword is really written for two MBSR teachers from me. And at the end, there's a whole sort of section called "What is Good Enough Teaching?" And we haven't done it yet, and I don't know whether we'll decide that it's worth doing, but because we don't want to overload the curriculum. But there are parts of what I say in that foreword that were really directed to new MBSR teachers, to really give them a kind of understandable framework, a commonsensical framework for what does it mean to be good enough at this. And then the question of whether this is stealth Buddhism, it's not stealth and it's not Buddhism, it's a kind of universal Dharma that has a lot of deep connectivity with Buddhism. Now, Buddhism itself is not some unified field, and the Buddha was not a Buddhist, and there's no kind of traditional kind of God-based religion associated with this. So this is in some sense a challenge for all of us as teachers, almost a koan, like, what is this? When we use the word Dharma, because if we abandon that language, this will turn into one more cognitive behavioral, quote unquote, intervention. And it will lose that orthogonality that is liberative. And so we have to develop a language, and we don't have it in America, at least in English, a liberative language that's universal, that has to do with the nature of self and the personal pronouns in particular, I, me, and mine. And is that who we are, or is that the story of me, starring me and how horrible things are, or how fantastic I am, or whatever it is? And this may be, as the Buddha himself framed it, the cause of all our delusion and aggression and harming of ourselves as well as other people. So I don't know. I think MBSR itself is a stage in human development, or not MBSR so much as the M is a stage of human development. And let's not forget that Arnold Toynbee, who was one of the most famous historians of the 20th century in the UK, said that he thought that the 20th century, in the end, when all is said and done, would be recognized as the most significant event would be Buddhism coming to the West. Now, what he meant by Buddhism, it's like I am not a Buddhist. I do not consider myself to be a Buddhist, although I get projected that onto me. But I am a serious, I would say, student of Buddhist meditation practices and Dharma, and just trying to figure out how to instantiate that in my own life. The last thing I'll say is that almost a year ago, exactly a year ago, a whole bunch of Korean monks from my teacher's tradition, the San Buddhism in Korea, came to New York City and did this gigantic thing, and went to Yale University and supported a big program at Yale University. And they had dialogue between me and the head of the entire San Buddhism in Korea, Venerable Jin Woo. He and I, in front of like a whole lot of different Korean journalists and cameras, TV cameras and everything else, filmed a dialogue on the interface between non-dual MBSR practice and San Buddhism. Okay? And if it's not non-dual, if we can't use some kind of language to point to beyond thising and thating, then there's no point in doing MBSR. There's no point in teaching it. How one takes people, or take even ourselves, how we move in that trajectory to understand what non-duality even means, and non-striving really means. This is the heart of things. And if the Buddhist traditions are being influenced by MBSR, and they are, not just in Korea, but in all sorts of different places, and is in some sense recognized as a valid articulation of what they consider to be Dharma, then what are our responsibilities here, and how do we use language in a way that doesn't imprison us, but also doesn't brand us in a way that that makes it impossible for people to understand anything about what I just said? So I don't think there's any kind of facile answer to this, but I certainly, would abandon it and take my name off this thing if we can't frame it in that kind of universal Dharma perspective.
Yeah, thanks,
And
Jon.
I'm
I
happy
think
to do that. If people feel like, no, it should not be done in that way, I'm happy to take my name out of it. And, you can quote whatever you want, but the reason I put my name on it was because, and I went through a huge many years long process, as some of you can attest to, of reluctance and, also being too busy to do it. But once I set my mind to it, and I'm still in that process of trying to trust that this document needs to be birthed in a way that is not about me, but is about all of us in some sense, inquiring about what the hell is this thing that we do that we call MBSR, or that we transmit really rather than do, called MBSR. And if we can do that, then health insurance, if it pays for it, you see, we're elevating the deep understanding of science and psychology and public health and everything else, because we're pointing to the nature of human beings that very often is missed when we simply see people through their diagnoses or through their story or through the story of my suffering. And the suffering gets looked at, but the mind never gets looked at. That there's a quantum leap if we can liberate ourselves from that to some deeper understanding. It seems to me that's what this is about. And if it isn't, I don't want to have any part of it, personally speaking. But it is scary. So I don't know if that makes sense to anybody or not, but that's what I would have to say about it.
Yeah, thank you. There's a related question on dual, non-dual from Yashi. And I think it comes out of the shift from teaching just awareness of breath to moving towards focused attention. And he writes, he's quoting Appendix A3. While MBSR starts out by introducing focused attention, a dualistic practice in that it tends to separate an observer from what is being observed. Could you clarify whether within MBSR focused attention is best understood as dualistic or a non-dualistic practice?
I think that framework is wrong from the very beginning. And I think that it's wonderful to have this conversation, because we have to remember that if you walk in there thinking, okay, first I'm going to teach a dualistic practice, focused attention, which is not my language either. That came out of Richie Davidson's laboratory. But sort of, and there's no question, it came from Mathieu Ricard, that there is sort of a focused attention, and it looks like there's a me meditating. I am meditating. Okay, so there's me, and then there's the meditation. Okay, but that's kind of just the skillful, sort of means for entering into something that's actually strange for people. But if the teacher understands what we even mean by using a term like non-duality, then it's not like, okay, we're going to teach a dual practice and then we're going to heal you from the results of teaching you a focused attention practice. No, from the very beginning, we state, or at least I state, that it's never the objects of attention that are important. The objects are just, it could be anything. It's the attending faculty itself. And that attending faculty is called awareness. And for me, awareness is synonymous with mindfulness. Okay, the mindfulness means awareness. Nobody has to get awareness. We all have it. It's access to it that's problematic because of thinking and emotions and sensations that grab us and when they're painful or when they're pleasurable. And then we lose our minds or we lose our attention. And so this is a kind of reminder, so to speak. That's one of the meanings of sati in Pali, is the memory. So that's one element of mindfulness, is that it's like you remember, or you reconnect yourself with the membership of your own wholeness. And then there's no place, as it says in the Heart Sutra, no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain. If you try to start people meditating with the notion that they're supposed to feel a certain thing if they do it right. Am I doing it right? Everybody knows this. Am I doing it right? I'm just not feeling anything. I mean, this is just like my mind is driving me crazy and my body hurts. And then, it's like, well, that's perfect. It's not like, oh, you're a bad meditator and you should have focused attention that's like, undisturbed, unperturbed. No, don't create an artificial, reify an artificial ideal that now you're striving for. You've gotten off on the wrong foot and you could ruin people's meditative experience for 30, 40, 50 years. And I've seen it in all the Buddhist traditions, even the Buddhist traditions, people think they know what meditation is. And it's like, no, it's like, this is the paradox of it all, is that there really is, you're already okay. And you have this superpower called awareness, and we never get taught how to access it in school. We're all taught about the other superpower of thinking, which is a great superpower, but awareness is a bigger superpower because you take any thought and you can hold it in awareness. So it's got to be bigger than thought. But accessing it, that's where you exercise the muscle. That's why we get our asses, so to speak, on the cushion. Okay? And so every one of us has, I'm talking to a group of extremely experienced meditation teachers. That's your primary job description. You are a meditation teacher. And what that means is you are a Dharma teacher. And what that means is you are a teacher of the nature of reality. And it goes beyond words. That's one of the reasons we use poetry. Because the poets, at least, are kind of like people who are odious enough, dare enough to put into words what can't be put into words. And when they're good at it, it's like, it takes our breath away, we say. So this is not about one person creating a curriculum that everybody follows like a protocol. And I know we're allergic to even the word protocol or the word like this, just give me the protocol and I will teach MBSR. This is the protocol. Okay. And I don't know how else to talk about it. That's why I was reluctant to ever have a manual like this, because ultimately you're asking, or in the service of other people, you're asking the most fundamental question is like, is this a technique or is this a way of being? And are people already okay and just don't know it? Or do they have to go through some huge process before they become who they already are and lose the kind of strong attachment to the story of me that keeps me imprisoned? So I don't know how else to talk about this except to say, if we give up that non-dual dimensionality or don't understand it, this is why we need to practice. We need to study with a whole range of different teachers, because everyone has a different angle. They're different doors into the same room. So you don't stand in the doorway, as Bob Dylan said. But admire how my doorway is the best meditative doorway, and look at those other doorways and they're inferior and whatever. The Tibetans are, they trump the, sort of Vipassana people or whatever. It's like, that's nonsense. They're all different doors into the same room. And it's the room of the human heart, and we already have it. We already are it. And that's all true for all the people who come to us in the MBSR classroom. And that's the transmission. That you know that from the moment you say hello, welcome. And then things unfold from there. And yes, of course you can teach focused attention, but you don't teach it as a kind of dualistic practice. You teach it as a kind of observation of a certain kind of phenomenon that is part of life, namely breathing or feeling your feet or feeling a body scan or whatever. But it's not about feeling relaxed at the end. It's like knowing how you feel moment by moment by moment. And if you're in pain, that's okay too. Giving people permission to have their experience validated as okay for now. And can you hold pain or anxiety or fear right in this moment and ask yourself the question, is my awareness of my pain or anxiety or fear in pain or anxious or whatever? And you will invariably find that people say, actually not. It's not. Well, there's that hidden dimension. There's that orthogonal dimension. How about inhabiting awareness as your default mode as the neuroscientists would say, rather than the I, me, and mine story of me and how bad it is for me and everything else, which is true, but it's not true enough.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
not saying anything all of you don't already know, and
No, but
I'm
it's important.
surprised to even find myself so energized around it. But I guess that's part of the love affair, and that we haven't had enough conversations like this.
I think it's
I
so
would love to
important
hear
because
everybody's
teachers look at MBSR often and think, oh, first they have to teach this, the breath or focused attention, and then we're going to expand and be aware of this and be aware of this, rather than that it's awareness. It's awareness, and awareness doesn't care what it's where. Right.
And your being, when you walk into the room, is the curriculum in that moment. How you be.
Right. Yeah.
And we're going to, yes, take people on a voyage of discovery. But what is being discovered depends on how deeply you understand your own relationship to practice.
So I'll just ask a follow-up question, and then we'll change the subject. And that's that for many of us, the breath is not just an object of an attention, but is an emotional barometer, and it's just so much more than just an object. And I'm wondering, while I don't want to prioritize or the breath as different from sensations or as different from sounds, that for many of us, we've benefited from knowing how the breath changes in relationship to everything else.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I had no idea that I would be talking so much during this time. And I feel like, since we've got less than a half hour, I mean, I really want to see what the response is to where we've come so far from as many people as possible, and
Okay, so there's
speak myself so much.
Okay,
so is something going on in the chat around the time of practice recommended around 45 minutes or so that I think is worth addressing, because there's quite a few people sharing about that, but I don't want to hijack the agenda, Elaine.
Maybe we should have these meetings periodically and really drill down into a lot of these sort of more technical questions in a certain way.
Well, Jon spoke to the length of practice.
And there are a lot of comments after that. So I think it is something that's been up for quite a while, around, the 45 minutes of practice. And for some folks, say with ADHD or other backgrounds, it might be challenging for that.
Can I just say, Eric, that I always make deals with people offline, in other words, you talk with people individually in the class and say, look, just do 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't announce that to the whole class. It's not skillful.
Yeah. I think the way I language it, for whatever that's worth, is, our evidence does suggest that people who practice more have bigger effects. And at the same time, you can imagine, just like practicing piano or something, we're going to get better if we practice more. But if our teacher is telling us to practice more than is natural or good for us, we might quit. And so how can we meet people where they are at, and recognize whatever symptoms they may be dealing with while still holding a high bar, but to engage with compassion and clinical understanding of what they're working with. Also, my sense of this is MBSR, and Jon is the founder of it, and my understanding, Jon's firm on the 40 to 45 minutes. And so
it's not exactly true. I mean, I make deals with people all the time, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every one of us knows that people come in with stories you would not believe possible, that you've never met somebody who had a life like the person that you're talking to, like a person who can't sit down in a class, has to stand for the entire class, or is in so much pain that, and squatting might be the best position. So they just squat through the whole class, or they lie down through the whole class. Or they say, I'm living in a completely chaotic situation. There's no way I can meditate for 45 minutes. I say, that's where the non-dual comes in, not as a kind of technique or a clever way to solve problems, but as the fundamental thing is, even when you're talking with this person, are you fully present? Can you see this person as they are? And not making practice into some kind of dualistic, sort of should. But then the person feels met, feels seen. Very often that doesn't happen in healthcare. And then you say, look, can you be here for one in-breath per day? And you say, well, that seems like, maybe I could do that. Could you be here for one out-breath? Start there. So there's no separation between compassion and the curriculum, but it doesn't mean that people, if you say that to the whole class, then everybody will sort of tend to go to the lowest common denominator. So you set the bar as high as you feel it's reasonable to set it, and then you negotiate offline with people to bring them along to the place where they want to do more. They're highly motivated. And then let's not forget where we started out, that ultimately the body scan or sitting meditation, these are, as I said, different doors into the same room, but the room is life itself. So that's where there's no end to the meditation practice. And if you get the wrong understanding that you're supposed to feel relaxed at the end, or you're supposed to feel less pain or less suffering, this is putting a huge dualistic burden on yourself. Whereas if you say, like, can you just be aware of what you are experiencing? There's a certain kind of authenticity to that, and a validation that right now I'm actually okay, in the way I explained before about, like, is your awareness of your anxiety anxious? And in those kinds of ways, bring people along as best they can as you guide the entire class at the level that you feel is valid to do. And ultimately, throw the curriculum out. Trust your own loving kindness. Trust your own immeasurables. They're called immeasurables for a reason, and they are gifts to give to somebody else who might not know about them, as a place to reside or take refuge from trauma or from the story of my life, which has been one failure after another. This is what we see in MBSR to some degree. And I think that's why it's survived for so long, is that we all embody that kind of open-hearted spaciousness and not like imposing a particular kind of should or curriculum on everybody to get a particular kind of end result that everybody would agree is so terrific. And I feel like it's an incredible privilege to be part of something like this. Speaking just as one of you, I do not like to be in the position that I keep getting put into as the originator of MBSR, because I always felt that it's never about the MBSR, it's about the M. It's already done incredibly good things with cognitive therapy and in all sorts of other domains, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based this and that. And the real challenge is it true that it's mindfulness-based? Then what does that mean? And that becomes a koan again. But it's like all of us are equal in this in some very profound way. And when we walk into the MBSR classroom, or for that matter, do research on it, that's the orientation that I hope this curriculum actually supports for all of us.
Thank you. Lynn, I'm just wondering, there was a question early on about, are there any changes, many changes to the guidance on movement? Is it still yoga-based? And I know there was some language about whether we call it yoga or mindful movement. I wonder if you want to speak to that in general.
Sure. I want to follow up from what Jon just said in this really rich conversation. And it's amazing to have this opportunity to all be together. And I really want to encourage you to speak with each other about this, because a lot of these questions arise and we want somebody, I want somebody to tell me what to do. and the heat of teaching, the being in the moment where somebody says, I can't do the body scan, or this invites us, where am I uncomfortable with either setting a boundary or giving someone the self-agency, the self-sovereignty to decide for themselves. In some ways, this is what the trauma-sensitive practice can do, is give people more agency earlier in the program. So people get to decide, if practicing this long isn't right for me, what happens the moment right before I need to stop practicing? Or what happens if I extend it for 15 seconds? What happens? We are all so on automatic pilot. We don't like something and we move away immediately. So this idea, could you be awake to this in-breath? I just think this, for me anyway, this just keeps pointing, like, where am I uncomfortable with this? Where do I need to explore and investigate, not look at the curriculum or to Jon even, but like, what's true for me, as Jon Kabat-Zinn has been pointing to, this our own practice. Okay, back to mindful movement. Yes, it's still yoga based. And this is one of those places where and this has been going on for years, this idea of, where is it skillful to call it mindful movement? And of course, it does arise from yoga postures. So again, how do we hold this tension? And there are populations where it's really skillful to call it mindful movement. There are places like elementary schools that yoga has been, you're not allowed to do that. Would you call this a yoga posture? You could call it mindful movement or stretching. So this is where common sense is a huge guide. And if we go through the curriculum, this document, and we change all the mindful yoga or all the yoga to mindful movement, what's lost? So can we work within the vernacular, the different ways of speaking, this articulation in ways that meet the moment? And there are still guardrails. We all, most of us travel at the right speed when we're on the highway. So there's something here holding us. And where is their flexibility? This feels like the ongoing conversation that I've been in with teachers for, all of the years I've been teaching, how to locate what's here now.
And can I say about flexibility that what are we talking about? We're talking about building strength. What is yoga? It's building strength, balance, and flexibility. And the main focus is on the body, but the yoga is a form of meditation. I mean, if it's not mindful, it's not yoga. So again, the cultures are all different, and people have different sort of reactions to it, and the names are ultimately empty. So I don't really care whether it's called yoga or not. I mean, you just kind of do it. But I can tell you that personally speaking, having passed, the 81-year threshold, and this being a practice that I've been doing for 60 years myself. And I'm talking now about getting my body down on the floor and working with it in the way that we call yoga, but mindful yoga, that, this is at 81, this is it is phenomenal to be able to be in that kind of relationship with my body and see the moment by moment and day by day, sort of consequences of taking care of it in a certain way, and also realizing how it's on the way out. What it really means to age and move towards not being on the planet anymore. And so I just want to sort of make a kind of very personal kind of statement around this, that this is not about an 8-week curriculum. This is about a lifetime curriculum that if people don't like it, they can do something else. I mean, it's not like, if you do MBSR, you can't do tennis or swimming or any other, range of kinds of things. It's a way to take people and in 8 weeks remind them of how unbelievably beautiful life is and how many different ways there are to relate to it in ways that are wholesome and healthy and life promoting and violence reducing in oneself and in the world. And so I think it's fantastic that we're having these meetings, these conversations. We should probably meet like this every month for a year or two, and just and have everybody's voice be heard around these kinds of issues, because I know you all have views on this, and not from your head, but from your own personal experience, because you've been practicing for so long, and because you've been teaching for so long. And you've been teaching, when all is said and done, we're all teaching ourselves. You're teaching you to the other people. And hopefully, you're aware enough to not let the ego kind of, make it all about you. But the fact is that, and I say this constantly when I'm, leading a retreat or something like that, I'm learning more when I'm leading a retreat than anybody at the retreat, or at least as much. I mean, it's not like I'm just like imposing something on people. Like, no, this is like a place where we all are growing at our growing edges. And sometimes it's really painful. It's not like all wonderful, but it's authentic. It's kind of there's a sort of sincerity to it that transcends trying, and I love that. But it's just one way. I mean, people can find their own ways. It's not like we're trying to sort of make the world, into a MBSR haven. But the world could sure use a lot of the M, no matter what the vehicle is for expressing it in the world. And every single one of us is a different vehicle, and we should all recognize that and do it our way. And if the curriculum puts you in a straitjacket, throw this thing out. Throw this thing out. But don't call it MBSR unless it resembles to a very high degree MBSR, because we need to continue to do science and transform medicine and the clinical domain with it. And if we, if it becomes like too generic and everybody's like doing whatever the hell they want, but they call it MBSR, we're going to get rid of yoga and do Tai Chi, and, that'd be wonderful. Sure, do that, but don't call it MBSR, call it something else. Just as skillful means, and as a form of compassion to ourselves.
So I'm going to jump in here because we're coming to the end of our time, and I really appreciate everything that's been said and all of the beautiful comments on chat and all the emojis that have been flying around. And I think what's clear from this, I mean, it's been really inspiring, is that having some kind of monthly meeting, maybe in different languages, just to go through the curriculum, even week by week, and have these questions really looked at by all of us, is a really worthwhile exercise and brings us together in a beautiful way. And thank you, Jon, and thank you, Lynn and Eric, and all of you who have contributed so much. It's really quite remarkable. So stand by and wait for the next announcement, whether it comes from the GMC or Brown or whatever organization. I think there's a lot of value in us being together in this way as teachers and trainers of new teachers. And I did want to acknowledge and maybe close out that it is September 11th, which is the 24th year since September 11th, quote, in quotes, occurred here. And there's a poem that I actually discovered. I think it was first put to me from the UMass collection of poetry that you used to get when you were studying there. And this poem is really relevant to this conversation and to the group that's here, and to some of the tensions that Jon talked about that arose from the various schisms that happened. And the poem was written by this 11-year-old named Maddie Stepanek, and it was written the day after 9/11. And it came up a few times in my mind, actually, as we were putting this event together and some of the communication that went on around it. So I just wanted to maybe close out with this poem as an expression of what is possible, what is possible, and what we're all part of in terms of making it possible. So the poem is For Our World by Matty Stepanek. He wrote, "We need to stop. Stop for a moment, just stop. Before anybody says or does anything that may hurt anyone else. We need to be silent, just silent. Silent for a moment. Before we forever lose the blessing of songs that grow in our hearts. We need to notice, just notice. Notice for a moment before the future slips away into ashes and dust of humility. Stop, be silent, and notice. In so many ways, we are the same. Our differences, our unique treasures. We are a mosaic of gifts to nurture, to offer, to accept. We need to be, just be for a moment. Kind and gentle, innocent and trusting, like children and lambs, never judging or vengeful. And now, let us pray differently yet together. Before there is no earth, no life, no chance for peace. I thought we needed at least one bell. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Francis. Thank you all. And we will be in touch. The recording and the transcript will be sent out for those who have been asking for it. And yeah, to be continued, always. Be well, friends. And feel free to unmute and just say whatever you'd like to say. I mean, it'll be a cacophony, but that's okay.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Richtig cool.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Liebe ich immer das.
Thank
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Vielen Dank. Ja, geil. Sag es mal. Hand ist
Bye.
Santi,
Santi,
I
I'm
have to thank you.
thank you.
Santi was our
Was our
technical.
technical.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Do this.
Do this.
Okay.
Okay.
We do have to
You have to
end.
end.